broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings and welcome to International ACAC's Webinar Wednesday. My name is Eric Hyde from University of Pennsylvania's English Language Programs, and I want to welcome you to our last Webinar Wednesday of 2018, Wellness and Work-Life Balance, Pacing Yourself During Admission Season and Prepping for the Spring. We have a fantastic panel here with us today to share some information. And just before I turn it over to them, just a couple of housekeeping items. So first, all of you attendees can ask questions by typing them into your dashboard. You'll see a question panel there. You can go ahead and submit any questions all throughout the webinar. I will collect those questions and we'll pose them to our panelists at the end. Also, just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the International ACAC website very soon. So with that, I will turn things over to Jorge.
Thank you so much, Eric. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everybody out there. My name is Jorge Delgado, and I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Brandeis University, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So a big hello from the Northeast here in the U.S. I will be serving as your moderator today, and we have a fantastic set of panelists broaching a topic that I think is very important in our particular profession. So first and foremost, I would like for them to introduce themselves, and then we will go right on with the conversation.
Hi, I'm Doug Wren with Wren International. We work with CIS and formerly ECIS, and a lot of different recruitment tours, and happy to be here. I'm based in Salt Lake City.
Hi, I'm Brandy Franson. I'm the Senior Associate Director of International Admission at Rollins College, formerly Linden Educational Services, formerly Savannah College of Art and Design, so kind of been here for a long time.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marcela Mejia Martinez. I'm the AVP of Admission at Chapman University in Orange, California. And I've been with Chapman University for a little over 20 years. And prior to that, I was at Loyola Marymount University. Prior to that, I had a different life.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Foster. I'm Director of University Guidance and High School Counseling at Saigon South International School. Previously, Western Academy of Beijing, Bangkok Patna School in Thailand, and Auckland International College in New Zealand.
Thank you to all our panelists. Eric, if we could go to the next slide, please. The first to present is going to be Doug, and so we'll throw it to our colleague in Salt Lake here.
All right. I think I'm going to get a little personal on this one. I have a unique I've had a unique opportunity to be an employee and then a business owner, and while doing recruitment tours, being a tour manager. And when I was younger, 20 plus years ago, when I was an employee, I thought I made a list of things that being on a recruitment trip and was really tough. It was exhausting, and I made a list of things that I always, I wish we could do, business class and all these great things, but of course budgets and other things sometimes prevent us from doing certain things. But I always thought, oh, I would love to bring my girls. I have 2 girls, and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be fantastic to bring them on trips at the end of a trip or before a trip or combine them. And then I got a little caught up with becoming an elite status on every major airline and just set ridiculous goals. And the 2 girls versus millions of miles, at one point I had to step back and sort of get my priorities straight and focus on what really matters. And I think that we're all in a unique position, especially those of you who recruit internationally. And I think that sometimes you say, well, next year I'll have a next time, or there's always another trip. And I would say to you that you do have a limited opportunity to share your experiences. And I think that being able to connect with your family and possibly friends at the end of a trip or before a trip is extremely important, especially because I think that you never know. You never know how much time you have. And now that I have one in college and another senior in high school, I thought, oh my goodness, where did this time go? Next slide, please. Going to one of the things that we do in our company, and I would say this is something that I would hope that maybe one day you could propose or even think about as you go up the ranks, and if it's possible at your institution to do something similar or something that benefits those that are recruiting and taking time away from their families and from their lives. But one thing we do at Ren International is we do one day before and not just one day after, but many days after. The one day before, our company, because we don't pay for business class because it is quite expensive, we do pay for the day at least one day before, and we pay for a spa treatment. I just want my people to be the best that they can be, and traveling 12 hours, 14 hours, Middle East or Asia or Africa and even Latin America, it just gets exhausting. And I just feel like that's something that's amazing. And I might even think about cryotherapy in the future. The day after, I think one of the reasons I think sometimes I get through a 3-week tour with a smile is because I'm always looking forward to something. And it's not for the tour to end. It's actually because I have somebody meeting me. Whether it be, and that's what I'm using my miles for. That's what I'm using all of my benefits. I try not to save them more than a year. I try to accrue as much as I can, but I'm saving. I've got a trip planned right after that, whether it be a quick one or sometimes long. And I will say that as my family, as my girls have gotten older, it was actually more difficult for my wife to leave. But we seem to manage, as I'm in Salt Lake, either manage to meet, whether it be sometimes in San Francisco and going out to Napa, sometimes just LA at a great restaurant. But there was always some way to reconnect before I came home. And that was really important for me. And I really encouraged that at Ren International and with all of our employees to try to do that, because I think it's just a special way to connect. Next slide, please. I always get asked, and I wanted to bring this up, is how much, what do you value your points at? What's the best credit card? What's the best mileage program? And what's the best of this and that? And I'd say whatever works for. There's so many. I could go for hours on this, and I have charts and other things. But the one thing I'll tell you about points is if you're saving them up, they devalue so quickly. And there's always another program. There's a merging of a program. There's another level that's introduced. And so I personally know a year in advance what I want to do. And I look for those value seasons of whether it be with the airline or with the hotels. I don't hold them for very, very long. I never have. I looked at my mileage. I'd gone through 1 million points this year, and I'm back at. I accrue them pretty fast, but they go very quickly. But I would recommend have something that you know what you want to do, or if you're spontaneous, probably much like Brandy, she's, it just happens. But I seem to be on this side where I like to plan a little bit more. The next slide, please. One of the things that I just want to share is these are I call them gems. It's little places that I look outside of the big Marriotts, or I love staying at great places. It's my favorite thing in the world. And my daughter Kennedy, she said to me one day, I was doing a radio show and I was talking about the importance of staying at a nice place. And she asked me, is there a bad place to stay? And I said, oh, child, you have never stayed at a bad place. I said, yeah, some people, because of budgets and other things. And she said, Dad, it's where you start your day and it's where you end your day. And I kept that with me, and I thought, you know what, that's really important. Even with leisure, when I do leisure travel for myself, I want to stay at a nice place. And I think that these hotels or these these organizations do a really great job at having an independent place to stay, an independent hotel, and supporting those independents. The small luxury hotels of the world, I love it because after one stay, you're bumping up to free meals or breakfast and Wi-Fi and late checkouts and things like that. The same with preferred hotels. I love them. I think Morgan's Hotel, they just have interesting hotels around the world and really fun restaurants in them as well. And I put the Airbnb up there because they just came out with some announcements about their Plus program where they're actually, I don't use them for business, I use them for leisure quite a bit. If I'm not staying more than if I stay less than 3 nights, I usually don't stay or even look at an Airbnb. But now they're actually going out to inspect them. They're with the Plus program, and they have a loyalty program coming, but they're going to compete a little bit differently. So watch for that because they're going to be offering more special places to go, special access to different homes or different areas, gym memberships, things like that. But I think these are all worthwhile to support.
Doug, thank you so much for those insights, and especially sharing so much about kind of the importance of family. I want to actually just bring in Jamison and Marcelo, or maybe both of you, just for a minute. I know you guys have sort of families at sort of different ends of the growth spectrum, right? You've sent some out of the house. Marcella, you brought some in. Jamison, have you guys had a chance to sort of share this part of your professional life with your families and this travel piece? Can you talk just briefly about that?
Do you want to go first? Can't hear you.
Sorry. My daughter is 9.5 months old, so she's pretty young. We are traveling home to Ohio over the winter break, so but I think our experience has been pretty limited.
Yeah, with my boys, definitely, and my family for sure. I have a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old, and we do just what Doug said. The idea that we plan trips and we use my miles for fantastic family vacations, whether it's going back to Colombia to visit family or an actual family vacation. This year, the boys have also had an opportunity to do study abroad classes. So one went to Italy, one's going to the Galapagos. So using the miles that I've accumulated so that they could take advantage of those things is kind of how I've blended my work benefits to really enhance our lives, really. This past summer, actually, we did an amazing trip. We were in Barcelona, all on miles. And because of my work family, we have a really good friend that works at the universities that actually has a house, a little casita in the Costa Brava in Barcelona, and we rented the house from her. So again, using our networks and our friends that live across the world or have places across the world was a great way to kind of integrate my family with my work, which is important, which is actually a good lead-in, I guess, to my next slide.
Absolutely. And I know you are going to talk a little bit about. Yeah, Jamison, please go for it.
Yeah, can I just jump in here? I'm going to throw this out there. It's a bigger discussion to have, but I do think that there's a huge opportunity here with all of the counselors that live around the world, working at international schools, who do disappear for the breaks, and their apartments sit empty. I mean, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, and I've got a 3-bedroom apartment here that is going to be sitting empty. And I think that there's this great opportunity, and I think you have people that you would feel comfortable reaching out to. But I think our network is one of our greatest attributes, our greatest strengths.
Absolutely.
We definitely have colleagues that have taken advantage of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get Jamison's email out there, and anybody who's in the audience can contact
Start our own Airbnb.
Eric, next slide, please, and then we're going to throw it over to Marcella, because I think this idea of sort of the blending and the balance is something that's very important. So take it away, Marcella.
Sure. I know that a lot of folks talk so much about this idea of work-life balance, but I call it work-life integration, because truly our our lives do integrate in all different things that we do. So if we could just change that equation, I think it's important. There's great synergy when we put all of our different pieces of the puzzle in terms of who we are, our work and career, our home and family, the community that we're a part of, as well as our personal well-being and our health. I think that those things are all really important. And so it's important that we find a way to really be flexible, that flexibility both at work, but then also with family and friends, and make everything a little bit more towards the benefits of having that balance or that integration. I think that's something that's important. When you talk about balance, you talk about things being absolutely equal, and there's no way with our lives and how connected we are, both through our phones and our computers and our work kind of bleeds into our daily lives, but not to mention that we love what we do and we love the people we work with. We really enjoy even serving our students. And so there's a different type of love for what we do, and that really bleeds into our daily lives. And I think that that's something that's important. Next slide, I think is important to move on. So this kind of is just a visual of what that would look like. The idea that at any given time, any of these circles really do kind of magnify. We were talking earlier this morning in the session, and how although there's a lot going on at work right now for the admissions folks with decisions and reading and the different things that are going on in our work lives, sometimes our family lives take precedent, and there's things that pop up. And as long as you can be a good communicator with your staff, with your boss, the idea that sometimes family needs to be the bigger circle in the puzzle. I know Brandy had stuff that kind of pulled her away from the office last week, and so did I. And everyone kind of rallies and comes together. And again, the idea of communicating is something that's so important, that as long as we're being good communicators, we can figure out what happens and how those goals all kind of intersect. So I think that's something that's important. Next slide, please. So just like on airplanes, I think that the important thing is to put your oxygen mask on first. If you're not taking care of yourself, there's no way that you can take care of others, whether that's folks in the office or your family, or volunteering in your community. The idea that you really need to take care of yourself is really important, and you have to manage that for yourself. So whether that's replenishing both physically and emotionally, as well as taking care of yourself by eating well, and including some sort of activity, and things that bring joy to your life. I think those things are really important. It could be anything from dancing or yoga or a walk in the park, a pet that makes you go out for a walk. Those are all things that are really important in bringing that. The other thing that I think is really important is to start your day off right. The idea that you might have rituals in your day that actually set the tone for your day. I think that's something that's really important. For me, it's important to start my day with meditation. I also have this ritual that every morning before the day starts, my husband and I have a cup of coffee in bed. And whether he goes down and gets my little coffee or I go down and get the coffee, that's the first thing we do. We don't turn on our phones. We don't look at what's happening on social media. I definitely don't turn the news on. That's something that I've completely taken out of my daily routine, is we don't turn the news on. That's helped me quite a bit. But really figuring that out for yourself. What is it that morning ritual looks like so that you can start your day off right? And important is really to remember to breathe. I think that's the other thing that's really important. I know that when my life was the most stressed, I noticed that one of the things I do is I hold my breath, and that's not a good thing. So that's why that morning meditation for me is something that's super important. So the other thing is really starting my day in gratitude. I think that throughout my day, I really find important things to be grateful for. I start my day with gratitude. I end my day with gratitude. I think it's a great way to kind of bookend the day, even when it's a rough day. Not everything's broken. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember. Next slide, please. I think the other thing that's important is to get clear on your priorities. You know, really what is the most important thing for you? And taking care of yourself again. Some of us, and I know Brandy's going to talk about this a little bit, are night owls. Some of us are really good in the morning. The idea of trying to get up for 5 a.m. to take care of self, sometimes getting up early to take care of self is what works for me. Definitely not setting that alarm at 1 in the morning though. Next slide. Something that's super important that I know that many of us think like, oh, I can run off 4 hours of sleep, or it's okay, I really don't need a lot of sleep. Actually, we do. We need to recuperate. And it's both for our physical well-being, our emotional well-being. The idea of getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep, I know it sounds insane, but it really is important. So there's so many benefits to sleep for both your body and your mind, and I think that's something that's really important. So taking care of yourself that way too. Next slide. Decluttering, I think, is also really key. To declutter your living space and your workspace are both really important. When you've got all that chaos around you, it's hard to stay focused. And so for me, it's important to have that decluttered space. At the end of the day, before you turn off work in the office, we know that you all bring it back home as well. But at the end of the day in the office, at least review what you actually completed. And if you have a chance, make a list for what you want to do the next day. You don't have to plan your week the entire week ahead because that's impossible. And I know that sometimes we make lists and don't get to anything on that list. That's okay. Carry it over to the next day. The intention is at least there. And I think that's something that's important, is to work with some sense of purpose. Your daily decisions and your actions have a great impact on what that work-life situation looks like. And so how you kind of set yourself up for success in that day, I think, is really important, both with family stuff as well as with work stuff. I mean, I know as a parent, there are times where the boys had games, or there was an important thing that I wanted to be at the school or whatever, and I could just adjust my day to make sure that I was balancing the things that were important. Because remember, it's not about how much face time you're giving something, it's just about those really meaningful moments. And I think that that's something that's important too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcella. I think that those are absolutely very important tips, and you know, it's important to do a lot for ourselves. I want to remind our attendees that they can be submitting questions along the way using the question function on the platform. But now we're going to throw it to our friend and colleague down in Orlando, Brandy Franson, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of just from her experience, you know, what to really kind of focus on, and some tips of the trade for self-care and expression. So off to you, Brandy.
Thank you. Eric, can you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. So one of the things that I think is really important is to know yourself and to know your body, and to not fight against your body. One of the examples of that is me trying to be a morning person, which I am not. My best hours are between midnight and 2 a.m., no matter how much I slept the night before. And it's really important for you to know yourself. Like, you can track how productive you are throughout the day and figure out what are my most productive hours. There have been studies that say that usually you're most productive only for about 90 minutes the entire day. So figuring out what those minutes are and when they are, putting those really big tasks or tasks that you feel are going to take the most amount of concentration at that time. And I'm fortunate in that I've had both very intense work environments, and then I've had more well-balanced and where I feel supported work environments. But I'll be quite honest and say that one of the things that I did when I was going through the interview process at my current job was they asked me, you know, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And I said, honestly, I will always get my job done, but one of my weaknesses is I am not going to be here at 8:30. I will probably be here by 9, and I will never miss a meeting, but I will rarely be here at 8:30. And I kind of I guess I managed their expectations early, and they were like, okay, that's fine, you know. And usually I stay till this time, but I get my job done so much better after people leave at the end of the day. Like after 5 o'clock when everyone's gone, I feel like I get so much more done. And so, but that's me, you know, and I realize that for others, it's the opposite. It's in the morning, and we all have different circadian, or it's technically ultradian rhythms. But it is part of our job to know that about ourselves, and not try to force us into someone else's schedule, you know. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just a really good way of like illustrating the two different personas. I think it's important to also obviously create moments that are going to be you moments, whether it's reading a book or whether it's just literally, I don't have cable at my house. I have Apple TV, and I sometimes watch it, but I rarely turn on the television. I would much rather speak on the phone with a really close friend and spend 30 minutes catching up with someone that I really care about than watching the TV. And so that's a very personal choice, and that's something that I've learned about myself, because to me, that's therapy. For me to connect with someone on that sort of human level, to talk to Marcella or you know, just to have a conversation with somebody that I know really well, is definitely therapeutic for me. So next slide, please. And this is really where I get most of my strength from. I think that and one of the things about balance is figuring out what is going to help you. And for me, it's being creative. There's actually data that shows that if you are if you're very fatigued, or if you're tired and you go to do something that's creative, coming back to what you were concentrating on before, you'll find new solutions. You'll all of a sudden be looking at it in a non-linear way. And so it's not A plus B equals C, but now you're like, wait a minute, what if I turn it around and then it's B plus A, and now I can do this? And it's because you've kind of switched between your right brain and your left brain, and or left side of the brain. So it is a great way to de-stress. It's a great way for you to kind of like be healthy and just check in with yourself. Whether it's, you can go to the next slide actually, whether it's putting together a puzzle, or if you're just wanting to take photographs or look through your photographs from your last trip, or even make a thank you card. There's always somebody that you need to thank, most likely. Instead of buying a thank you card, making one out of something, even stuff that you have around the office, and sending something in the mail. I was having this conversation with my mom the other day. Marcella mentioned that last week was really tough. Speaking of feeling supported, my grandmother passed away, and I had all these emails coming in, and we were talking about life balance, and I was the opposite of life balance last week. But I did feel supported with, again, communicating. Everyone on this panel picked up the slack for me, and then people at work picked up the slack for me, and feeling supported, whether it's, and you obviously have to communicate that, but if you're not feeling supported in your work environment, there will always be a place where you will feel supported. It's kind of like when we tell our students, there's always that perfect college that will match and be a perfect match for you. I feel it's the same thing for jobs. And we evolve and we change, and I know that it's not like a forever job, but it is important to be able to feel supported in that way. I mean, at Rollins, I made this print that's my tagline is "Live it like you mean it," because I'm kind of like what Doug said, I just kind of pick up and go. I'm the kind of person that says why not all the time. So very few things will stop me from doing, except for money, maybe. That's the only thing that stops me from going and doing all the things. But at Rollins, I'm able to take extra classes with the art teacher. She lets me use the art room whenever I want. And that's really important to me. when I'm having a bad day, sometimes I just walk down there to the art room just to take 10 or 15 minutes just to soak it in, and then I go back. But I know that about myself. And so you have to be able to communicate well with yourself too. Next slide, please. And this is actually a really important point when I've traveled with all these lovely people that are on this panel. And I am one of the people that will drop my bag in the room and say, where are we going? Immediately when we get there, are we going to the market? Are we going to eat? Are we going to go see so-and-so's place because they live here? Are we going to go have happy hour with somebody that we know? Like, I am that person. And I am of the idea that Doug says, you know, a lot of us get complacent and think, well, I'll be back next year. It's fine. But we don't always know that we're going to be back. And so my thing is, no, we're just going to do it now. We're going to do it now because we are not sure that we're going to be back. And so I think taking that in and becoming part of the culture, whether it's eating at a local restaurant or, you know, not necessarily doing something touristy, but getting to know somebody. I've spent entire afternoons with strangers, like people that when I met them in the morning were strangers, and by the end of the day were my best friends. And that would not have happened if I wouldn't have left my hotel room that day. And you make these incredible connections that last lifetimes sometimes. So I think that that's a really important part of what we do too. Next slide, please.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
One of the things that we did this year in our application was and we got the question actually from a prospective student. We kind of polled students for good fast facts. We asked them, if we're visiting your city or your town, where should we go? And so for the territory managers, we're all keeping a list of all those things. So the next time I get to go to Maui, I'm going to hit all of those spots because I want to see where the kids think I should go. So it could be something as simple as even polling the folks that are applying to your school, and they could be giving you the hints of all the secret places and all the good places to eat and all that fun stuff. So just an idea.
It's a great way to connect with students too, because when I interview students when they show up on campus or I meet them on campus, I'll say, oh, I've been to your, you know, home city and I've eaten here and I know this place and that place. And then all of a sudden it changes your relationship immediately. They have something to grab onto, and they realize that you didn't just, you know, come and go and like ships in the night, you know? And so it's really a great way to grasp that connection with them.
I would also add just very quickly that I think that, you know, having those connections to different cultures and places, they especially on the college and university side, they allow us to be better at our jobs, right? We are not seen, and Jamison, please, you know, jump in here as necessary, but like, you know, we're not seen as these people that sort of just come in and out and come and do the visit and buy and come and do the interviews and buy. And so, you know, one of the things that especially, you know, in our office I stress is really getting to know the school communities, getting to know the culture of where you're traveling, and that allows you to be a better recruiter, not just when you're on the ground because you do get to go to those fantastic places, but as you're reading an application, as you're understanding the context of a student, not just academically, but socially, culturally, religiously, right? And so I think that this kind of engagement should be part of this kind of professional development as we are on the road and as we receive guests on our campus and are interacting with folks from around the world. So, I mean, that would just be my 2 cents on that.
I'll add to that. We value that as well, and we want to share Vietnam with our guests. And so I'm very lucky to be working for a school that also values that. And we have a budget that allows us to take the representatives that are visiting us, if we have time available, we go across the street and we go eat Vietnamese food, and that's a big part of the culture, right? And it's not just pho. We try to get out there and eat some different regional Vietnamese food. And just yesterday I had a lunch with 4 reps. And it was very clear that it was outside of their comfort zone. And I really liked that. I kind of liked watching them squirm a little bit But they're going to remember that. I thought that was really fun. It was a good time.
Absolutely, Jameson. I think that's actually a great segue, just because, this idea of coming out of your comfort zone and really taking yourself out of your kind of usual tempo of life in small and large ways. I think that you have a lot to add on that, and I know you're going to talk to us about life on the wildline and how that went for you. And so I'd love to throw it to you now for you to sort of discuss kind of your recent adventure, and then kind of where that took you both physically around the world and how that affected kind of your personal growth.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I have two caveats. One is that I am horribly sick right now. I have the flu, so I'm feeling a bit foggy, and my voice is very weird, so I apologize. I also want to say that I kind of feel like I don't belong on this panel, because what I'm sort of addressing isn't the most practical tip for work-life balance. I think the panelists so far have kind of given you good ideas and tips to apply to your current job and your current life, and mine is more of an alternative idea that people could consider. I would really encourage people to consider it, but it's a big commitment, and I guess sometimes you have to have the right circumstances for it. So my story begins in a doctor's office, and I was visiting the doctor, and I'm standing there in front of my doctor, a very nice Dutch lady who is reading an EKG printout of my heart rate, and she looked at this printout. It's the sort of this thing. She took a look at it, and literally within 1 second she said, "Yes, there's something wrong here," and that was terrifying to me. I had spent probably 2 weeks. I kind of felt like I wasn't sure whether I was going to make it through the end of the day, because I was having panic attacks constantly. Like my heart was just like palpitating 24 hours a day, and it was just that I didn't have that work-life balance. I was too stressed. I was too worried about work. I hadn't found the right balance. So this experience in the doctor's office kind of it inspired me. It was the genesis of an idea that actually comes from my childhood. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who took a sabbatical and chose to buy a boat, and he sailed to Portugal, and from there he was a history teacher, and his wife was also a teacher, and he had two young children, and they decided to follow in the path of Christopher Columbus, and they did this for I think 2 years. And I remember seeing pictures and just being blown away by it, and that just really stuck with me. So please, if you would advance the slide, please. So that's kind of what I did. I bought a boat. I've been sailing since I was a child, so I was pretty comfortable with sailing, but I certainly had never sailed a boat this size, and certainly not alone. So this is my boat in the top left-hand corner, and you'll see that the name of the boat is Wildline, and that name comes from that experience of sitting in the doctor's office discussing this erratic heart behavior. I think it also is kind of certainly with more recent events in my life, has come to symbolize just the unpredictability of our lives. And I think the sort of hilarious attempt that we make to plan our lives, because there's always going to be surprises around the corner. And if there's anything that I learned from this experience, it is that you have to be ready. It's not what happens, it's how you deal with it. Because there's always going to be a broken engine. There's always going to be a visa issue. There's always going to be an injury. And if you can kind of get through it with a smile and a positive attitude, you're going to be happy. You're going to live a good life. Yeah. So I really appreciate what was mentioned earlier as far as like getting involved in the culture. This is something I really made a big effort to do. These pictures are all from French Polynesia. I was there for a year after sailing from New Caledonia to Australia. I was Australia for about 5 or 6 months, and then New Zealand for about 5 months, and then I sailed from New Zealand to French Polynesia, which was 30 days of sailing nonstop. No stops, no water, no food, just going 30 days straight. So.
Now, Jameson, sorry to interrupt, but I want to jump in because I know that stretch specifically. Did you have someone with you, or were you by yourself?
Yeah, so for the longer passages, I would always get some crew to come with me. So between New Caledonia and Australia, I had 2 really good friends from the U.S. Australia to New Zealand, I picked up 2 crew that I'd met along the way, and so there were always crew. Typically 2 people would come for the longer passages. Wow.
But for a lot of the time you were alone, right? I mean, you were it was you with you. Can you sort of say a little bit more about that and sort of what that did for you?
Yeah, I would also say that I probably have a higher threshold for being alone than perhaps most people. I love being alone. I know that when I was traveling in Western French Polynesia, there were time spans of 2 to 3 weeks where I didn't speak to another human being, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It comes and goes. Sometimes you really need to connect with somebody, and it was tough because I don't speak French. Most people in French Polynesia don't speak English, but when I was in Tahiti, I got involved in what's called Va, which is the Polynesian outrigger canoes, and I remember going to practice one day and looking around, and there were probably 20 boats being put into the water, and each boat has six people, and I was the only person who didn't speak French, and I was the only Caucasian there, and I just somehow kind of hand signaled my way onto a boat and met this great group of guys that we just had a great team together, and I would go paddle every single day for about 2 months, every single day. So it was great. It was a great experience.
Awesome. If you could provide kind of a cheat sheet for folks who are thinking of how do I begin, how to do this? Like this was a fantastic endeavor, right? This sort of like 3+ hour tour, I guess we can call it. It was about 2 years, but what would you tell folks who are thinking about maybe taking this kind of adventure on in their life? What would you say as advice?
Well, if you go to the next slide, I think I cover some of my tips. Now, the idea of a mini retirement it comes from Tim Ferriss, and I like this idea of a mini retirement. The idea of retirement terrifies me, and I think it should terrify everybody, because I have met many people on the water who have just bought their brand new 50-foot yacht. They've invested everything in this thing, and they are really struggling. And so what we think we love, and we think we're going to enjoy for the rest of our lives, is not always true. And I think that the idea of a mini retirement is a great way of testing the waters in some idea that you're thinking might be your retirement. So as far as somebody who's interested in possibly doing this is such an individualized thing, right? So I like think big. You know, Kevin Garnett says anything is possible, man. So it really is. I think that we are limited by our own creativity, and I know that there's another boat that's out there that it was a young couple from Europe, and they decided to shove off, and their sole mission was to find an iceberg, because there's a good chance that their children won't know what icebergs are, and they wanted to go see one and touch one, and I think that that's so simple and beautiful and complicated under that topical level, but I really like that couple sort of indulge in a curiosity, and maybe your curiosity is cooking, maybe it's woodworking, maybe it's your music, maybe it's your family heritage, and you want to go back and look at where you come from. There's so many different ideas. It's really, you just have to be creative with it. Yeah, go ahead, Jorge.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I think those are fantastic tips, but, wanting to talk a little bit about kind of the end game and re-entry, so to speak. I think, making this fantastic move to Vietnam. How have you sort of navigated the kind of re-entry into sort of a professional, a professional life that is similar to what you had before, but obviously different because of your experience? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, the first month was a shock. Coming back was definitely a shock. I think it was not just my re-entry into civilization, but it was also the fact that I went from I essentially got a promotion, and so I was under a lot more responsibilities that were pretty heavy duty. And so it did take me a little while, and slowly I found my feet. So I think you have to kind of plan ahead for that. And I think it's also good that if you're talking to an employer after, while you're on the trip and you're kind of looking at rejoining the workforce, I think it's probably good to be honest with them and to say, look, I may need a little bit more leeway in that first month, and in getting my feet underneath me. I think if an employer values those experiences and the things that you gain from those experiences, then they'll give you that leeway.
Yeah. What are some other gains you would say that an experience like that and even the self-care that we were talking about before really brings to an individual?
Yeah. If you go to the next slide, I think. I don't know if this is the right one. Actually, if you go to the next slide, we'll come back to this. So the things that I think that I have gained from this experience, and I think this is universal for somebody who takes a step away from employment for 2 years, you really do gain perspective. My perspective from the sailing experience, I think that just the sheer danger of some of the stuff I was doing has put a lot of my headiness into perspective. I have, as was mentioned earlier, I have decluttered my life. I value the fact that this cannot control my life, and I'm very conscious of screen time. I think I've become a more creative individual, and really kind of when a challenge comes my way, I feel like I'm more of the type of person to just roll up my sleeves and be like, well, this isn't going to fix itself, so we've got to do this. And I think that applies to to a challenge in the office, and it applies to fixing your heat exchanger on your diesel engine. So I think you gain a lot from these experiences.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tim. I want to, with 10 minutes left, I definitely want to be cognizant of time and move on to the questions. So I'm going to ask Eric here to go to the next slide and then jump back in to sort of ask us, what questions you have been submitting kind of along the way. It can be directed to either individual panelists or questions maybe for the general group. And so, Eric, have we heard from any of our attendees?
Thanks, Jorge. We do not have any questions yet. So again, those attendees out there, go ahead and type those questions in, and we can share them with the panelists. While we give our attendees a second to maybe think of some questions, type those burning questions. I can ask you a question. You've all given some really fantastic advice. I wonder whether personally or from other people that you've worked with, what are some of the warning signs that we should look out for if we're getting too close to a point where we need a break, where we really need to say, all right, I need to step back and take a breather?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question, Eric, and I'll jump in first just really quickly. And this past weekend I flew to California actually for a wedding of a very good friend. And a friend from college, so I hadn't seen a lot of these people in many years, and catching up. Where do you live? How is the family? Oh my God, you got married. Obviously, the question of how's your life? What are you doing these days? You're still in admissions? That was the question, Jorge. And I said yes, and I found myself on more than one occasion being excited about explaining to people, what it is that I do, and working with students and opening the doors and minds of young people to possibilities that they might not have known that they had, right? And yes, there was that the education piece of it, but also the strategy piece of it, and the fact that I love my team in my office and the folks that I work with, and the things that I get to do on a daily level. And so I think that, to answer your question, kind of the inverse of that for me would be kind of a warning sign, right? Are you explaining what you do to people in that kind of circumstance? And are you not getting excited? Are you not feeling that passion that you felt, on your first post abroad at that first international school, on that first recruitment trip when you didn't know how to find the entrance to the high school? Those moments are not as vivid, I think, the more years you get under your belt. But if you still can have some of those, that sort of feeling in the pit of your stomach where what you're doing is exciting and engaging and meaningful to you and to others, I think that that can definitely be a warning sign that I would share with folks. I don't know if the other panelists want to jump in.
Well, I would say.
Oh, go ahead.
I would say your health. If there is a lopsided imbalance to that work life, your work life situation, then if your health suffers, that's a really big indicator. If you're constantly getting sick, then that's something you need to watch out for.
I was going to say, as a supervisor, that's definitely something that you look out for, even in the people that work with you. I think it's important that you look out for your team and tell them that, it's okay, take a break, unplug, take care of yourself. I think that that's something that's really important. If they're not communicating to you that that's something that they need, be aware. I think that that's something that's really important. Or as a friend, even, help your friends see it for themselves. And sometimes, like you're saying, Jorge, the words that you use when you're describing what the day is like and how things are going and whatever, if you sound like you're in a rut, if you sound like you're unhappy, get out, look for something new, or look for something that'll energize you. I think that's something that's important. You have to love what you're doing, and it has to be meaningful to you. I think in work, at home, in all the things that you do, and I think that's something that's really important.
Jorge, real quick, I think Marcella hit it on the head when she said about being grateful. I think the days, not a day, but days that go on that you can't find that grateful feeling, that what you're doing, there's no shame in stepping away for a while. And Jemison, when you know, I love that story because you kind of come back and realize, man, I love that. That was so great. And I think that doesn't happen I know that's not every day, but if it happens on multiple days and multiple weeks and months when you can't find that gratefulness, then it is time to step away for a while, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we did have a question pop up, so I'll share that with you all, and it's a good one. So this comes from someone whose part of their job is training a team, right? This person actually specified a group of 15, and the question is, do you have any tips for best practices regarding work-life balance during heavy application reading times? And maybe we can even expand it. So, you know, whenever there's a real intense, you know, maybe 4-week time stretch where it's just work, do you have any tips to share that can be passed along for maintaining work-life balance during those really intensive times?
Anybody want to go?
Marcella, I look to you. I know you have a fantastic staff, and it's robust in size, and so I'll let you sort of take a first stab at that here.
Yeah, I mean, we remind folks often, and like weekly, to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. We give folks an opportunity to read from home, as opposed to having to drive into the office. So, you know, reading your yoga pants, that's fine. So to try to give flexibility, I think, is important. We also remind them that we don't want them reading on a Sunday till 2 in the morning, knowing that they have to be in the office for a 9 a.m. staff meeting. We need them bright and rested and well. So we infuse that idea of re-energizing a lot. I'm lucky enough that I have an amazing group of assistant directors, associate directors, directors in other areas. So we really try to break those teams down a little smaller, so that we're in groups of 3 or groups of 4 or 5, and they're taking care of each other. So if you can do that, even if it's just a team lead for that particular time of the season, that way you've got other people taking care of each other. I think that that's something that's also really important, and you're giving folks an opportunity to lead. So that's definitely a plus. But we do remind them often to take care of themselves. And, you know, like today, one of our associate directors, Allie, who you all know, she was great. She brought in healthy snacks instead of cookies and chocolate. She brought in, you know, veggies, which was great, and fruit and things that can help feed people and keep them healthy. We also give them a lot of opportunities to eat in the cafeteria. We call it the Reader Family Lunch. So everyone kind of breaks away from their desk for an hour and goes and eats together. And it's not required, but it's definitely offered. So little things like that, I think, help keep them motivated and digestible small goals as opposed to this huge goal. I think it's something that's a little easier.
Yeah, and I would add, Marcel, I know we're wrapping up here. The hour is almost up, but you know, the camaraderie piece, I would second and echo that, because I think that, you know, with what we do, we spend so much time together, right? In committee, in the office, planning events, all of the things. That I think that camaraderie is so important. So those things, those small things that you can do to build that culture of trust in an office. And I think one thing I would add to what Marcella said was modeling as a leader in an office, and then having the leadership in the office, not just one person, but really anyone, modeling this idea of failing well. Okay, we teach, I think, younger folks how to succeed all the time, right? How to succeed, how to do well, how to get your apps read, how to get the trip done, how to master your slate. How many times do we talk? Do we vision? Do we lead by example on how to fail? What do you do when you don't read your apps? What do you do when something happens in your family? How do you ask for help? I think that right there is going to make a big difference, right? And not just kind of modeling that behavior yourself as a member of the team, but how do you react to others when they fail in the office? Because business practices, life is full of failure, and so how do you overcome that? How do you work through that? How do you learn from it? I think that's something that's really important that leads to trust and a more functional work environment. So those would be my 2 cents.
Right. I know it's officially 1 minute over, but if you don't mind, I want to throw one more question at you that popped up here at the end, and it's asking about recommendations on managing up, and if you have a manager who's not supportive, how can you manage the managers for productive conversations that make individuals and teams feel valued? Like I said, it was a good one. I didn't want to leave until we didn't have a chance to get that one in.
Yeah, Brandy, I would throw that to you just really quickly. I mean, that I think has a lot of, I think you can speak to that very well, but really talk about that sort of self-advocacy piece that I know that you're very passionate about. So maybe just a minute on that from you.
Sure. I think I think the most important thing in that scenario is to not feel guilty for wanting to advocate for yourself. So I think we as human beings always feel like, oh, I should be humble, I should be thankful for what I have. But it is okay to advocate for yourself and say, you know what, I've done all that I can do and I really need XYZ. Whether it's a new platform, whether it's new office space, whether it's a PTO day or a mental health day, it's okay to be able to communicate that, because if you don't communicate that, it becomes this very passive aggressive kind of relationship and it doesn't help anyone. And just being willing to risk a little bit of uncomfortableness to be able to communicate. I feel like the biggest critic that I have is myself sometimes, but I also feel like I'm letting people down, right? So when I don't get the files read, or if I had to take a day because I didn't get it all done, it's important to be able to go to the manager and say, this isn't working, and so we're both stressed out. We're both we have a very intense time right now. Is there any way that we could kind of share responsibility, or is there any way that you could do one thing and I could do another, and based on our strengths, we could get this done? That's been the most successful thing for me.
I agree on the whole strength finder. We're definitely finding that with a large team and folks that are struggling with the reading but are great at the presenting and meeting with students. So maybe they're doing more of the counselor of the day stuff and we're balancing out those things. But you're right. The idea of that advocacy for yourself is so important. You have to communicate that flexibility that you crave and make sure that when you offer those solutions or those proposals, you're thinking about the students you're serving, you're thinking about the other folks in your office, you're thinking about, how does that affect my boss? How does that affect my colleagues if I'm asking for this? And as long as it's really well thought out, there should be a good ear to figuring out how that works for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Marcella. And Jameson, please, can you cap it off here?
Yeah, just one of the things we talk about communication. I think communication is absolutely essential, but a lot of people communicate in very different ways. And I think that in creating an office environment where different forms of communication are valued is really important. One of the things that our school does is we do a lot of training with Critical Friends, which uses protocols. It's almost sort of like almost like a game that puts the conversation into a structure that allows everybody to participate and to voice their opinions. So even if you have to look for creative ways of communicating up, I would encourage you to kind of look at creative ways of doing that. The protocols are a great way of doing it.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Jorge, any final words to wrap things up?
No, I just want to thank all the panelists here for sitting in the wee hours of the morning and evening. So thank you all for participating. And I know, Eric, you have a bit of a preview of what's coming next year for the first Webinar Wednesday of 2019.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we're kicking off the year in style with next month in January. What are you reading? What are you listening to? So we'll be sending out more information about that so everyone can log in. Again, just as a reminder, this webinar was recorded, so we were able to capture all of this fantastic information. It will be posted shortly on the International ACAC website, so share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues, your coworkers, strangers on the street, anyone you see. And thank you again. That was wonderful information. It was really beautifully shared. So thank you for all your work and all this information. All right.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, we will say
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll see you next year. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.